Hi everyone, my name's Kristen McPhee and I am a practitioner in Marquette, Michigan. I see clients remotely as well, and I work mostly with integrative nutrition and clinical herbal medicine, and I occasionally teach community workshops. So this is one of those. I'll be teaching this at our local food co-op, and it's called Health Benefits of Everyday Culinary Spices. It's a nice workshop because it kind of warms people up to the concept of herbal medicine. Most of us have grown up around having spices and herbs in our kitchen cabinets, and um, not really knowing that they have therapeutic properties. We think of them more as just flavor enhancers. So I'm going to talk about 5 common spices in depth, and then I'm going to talk about 5 greens that you can make a medicinal or herbal pesto with at the end, less in depth with the greens. So I thought it would be helpful to begin by just doing a broad stroke overview of what these spices have in common, generally speaking, because I think as you go in depth, you start to realize that it's a little bit more difficult to remember what the key takeaways are and the acute subtleties are of each spice. So let's start here. Most spices have high essential or volatile oil content. Those words are used interchangeably, and I believe that volatile oils are essential oils, but volatile oils become volatile or evaporate at a set temperature. That's my understanding, but they tend to just be used interchangeably, which isn't completely accurate, but that's okay. So high essential oil content, which most of us are familiar with the essential oils becoming more and more popular. They have kind of a sharp or pungent taste. They tend to be stimulating to one body system or another, usually the digestive system or the respiratory system, could be the circulatory system. And these tend to be warm or hot as well, so they can actually provide some heat to the body. And they're carminative and antibacterial, at least most commonly, that's what you see. So they can help a lot with acute digestive distress like gas and bloating or cramping, nausea. And then the antibacterial can help fight off any foodborne illnesses, which historically would be very important since food safety and preservation and sanitation weren't all that well understood. So they can help with digestive foodborne illnesses, obviously, but also like things like colds and flus. And indications, so how those actions apply to actual ailments is that, as I said, digestive distress, upper respiratory and digestive infections. And obviously they're just providing more of an experience to enjoy our food, so you can taste and smell them, and they're often, many of them have vibrant, beautiful colors and textures, so it's just can be simply enjoyable at that. So the first spice I wanted to talk about was turmeric, and we're all quite familiar with this spice. It's related to ginger, which we're also going to talk about, so it's in the same family, the Zingiberaceae family. And the Latin name is Cucurma longa. And the part that we use when we're cooking, you usually just see it ground up as a powder, but it actually begins as a rhizome, or a type of root. And it originated in India and Southeast Asia, which most of us would guess since we tend to associate it with curries. And the key constituents that are in turmeric are curcuminoids and essential oils. And the curcuminoids, the most popular one of those is curcumin, which gives it its vibrant, bright orange color. It's antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and has anti-cancer properties. So that's pretty important. And then the essential oils are also a big part of most spices that we'll talk about, all spices that we'll talk about. It's pungent, it has a little bit of bitterness, it's warm, and it's stimulating. It's contraindicated in pregnancy because if you're taking it in high doses, the stimulating property could cause uterine contractions. And it's contraindicated in gallstones because it's actually can be used in as part of a therapeutic approach to get rid of gallstones, but you wouldn't want to do that without working with a practitioner. So the actions of turmeric are that it's anti-inflammatory, antiplatelet, hypolipidemic, choleretic, antioxidant, carminative, and hepatoprotective. And those kind of transfer over to how they're used with certain imbalances of the body. So the anti-inflammatory action would be applicable to things like osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, and even atopy like allergy, eczema, and asthma. Those are all inflammatory conditions that turmeric can kind of help support or counteract, in addition to lifestyle and dietary changes. It's antiplatelet, so it can help to lower blood pressure and LDL cholesterol, which is nice, meaning that it can help prevent blood clots and improve circulation. Hypolipidemic is helpful with lowering cholesterol. Choleretic means that it can help stimulate bile, so that's where it is helpful for people with a history of gallstones. And dyspepsia just means flatulence or gas, so it can help kind of calm the stomach from that. And it's antioxidant and hepatoprotective, so the antioxidant can reduce oxidative damage of things like the liver, blood vessels, and eyes. But then it also protects the cells of the liver from further damage, making it a really important herb for good liver health. And since our liver has so many roles in the body, it's helpful in a number of ways. A typical therapeutic dosage would be 1 teaspoon. So you'd want to try to have 1 teaspoon in a day in some form or another to reap some sort of benefits. And these are just 2 simple examples of ways to use it in your cooking. So I've made khichdi, which is rooted in Ayurveda, which is a traditional Hindu system of medicine. And you can, one thing that's recommended is you can do a cleanse with khichdi. So you would just be eating it as a mono meal and letting your body kind of do a gentle cleanse. But it's also a very nourishing, warming, grounding type of meal. It's got a complete protein because it's got grains or lentils and rice. And it's got other spices that are really great, like ginger and turmeric, that are helpful to the digestive system. So that can be one way to use turmeric. The other one that's really nice is to make your own golden milk tea, and that typically is with turmeric, coconut milk, or you could use regular milk and ghee, clarified butter, which is the traditional way. And that in Ayurveda is considered a health tonic. It promotes energy balance, nourishes the mind and body, supports sound sleep, immune system, healthy digestion, glowing skin, brain health, and even mood. So that's kind of a nice treat. You could have that any time of the day, but warm milk obviously can help with restful sleep and to unwind. And the links to those are provided below. So we're on to ginger, which is related to turmeric. As we said, they're in the same family. The Latin name is Zingiber officinale. Both of them are rhizomes, and both are from sort of similar parts of the world. Ginger's from Asia. And the key constituents here are essential oils, similar to turmeric, and oleoresins, which is a blend of resin. So think of like sap from a tree is very resinous, kind of sticky or tacky, and essential oils. So you can kind of see how they've merged that in the name. Let's see. The most common oleoresin or significant one in ginger is gingerol, and that attributes to ginger's hot taste and stimulating properties. The taste is pungent or very sharp, which most of us know. It's sweet, warm, diffusive, meaning it kind of spreads, and it's stimulating. It's contraindicated in a few things: peptic ulcers because it's so hot, gallstones because it's stimulating, pregnancy stimulating, and blood thinning, likely because it's just diffusive, so it may enhance the effect of a blood thinner. So the actions of ginger are carminative. So turmeric, I believe, was also a carminative. It's anti-emetic, meaning that it helps reduce nausea and vomiting. So it both help with acute digestive upset, but this ginger might be best for cases of, like, if you've got a bug or more severe upset going on. It's a circulatory stimulant, so that's why the picture in the background has someone warming their hands. It's anti-inflammatory, also like turmeric, and it's diaphoretic, meaning that it can help induce a sweat. So those actions kind of transfer over to improving digestion. So a carminative means that the herb would be used to improve digestion. We talked about nausea and vomiting, so that would be helpful in morning sickness. Because it's a circulatory stimulant, it's really helpful for things like Raynaud's syndrome, which is quite common up here in the Upper Peninsula, where I am. And because it's anti-inflammatory, it helps with osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, just like turmeric does. And because it's a diaphoretic, it helps with things like fever and common cold. So it'll help you to induce a sweat and kind of detox and clear that sickness. And a dosage for this one is recommended through kind of in divided doses, an 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon 3 times a day. Fresh garlic's obviously more potent than the powder, but if that's what you have, you can use that too. Susan Weed, there's a quote there that says, "Herbs rich in volatile oils such as ginger make lovely teas which are effective in easing spasms, stimulating digestion, eliminating pain, and inducing sleep." So it's just kind of, she's a well-known herbalist. So here's a couple of easy recipes. One is just a carrot ginger soup. Carrots are in season now. You can eat them throughout the winter. Make a really nourishing, warming soup, or you could just do a lemon ginger tea. If you wanted to add a little orange peel to lemon ginger tea, that can enhance the effectiveness for a cold and damp lung condition. So if someone has more mucus in their lungs and throat, it's good for that. So remember cold and damp conditions. Okay, so cinnamon is the next one, and this cinnamon is in the Lauraceae family, which is actually related to, I just lost my notes, related to sassafras, which root beer is made out of, which you could kind of see, from the flavor profiles, if you think of the taste of root beer, how there's some overlap. The part used is the stem bark, so they're not using the primary bark of the plant, but the branch. And it originated in Sri Lanka and India, but there are other cultivars sourced from China and Japan as well. I think there's about 4 or 5 different species of cinnamon sold commercially. And the ones that are from Sri Lanka and India are a bit more expensive, and they tend to last longer and have better flavor. And they're also low in coumarin. And the ones from China and Japan tend to be darker with a bit of a reddish tint. They're cheaper. They are a bit spicier and they have higher coumarin content. And coumarin is toxic to the liver in high amounts. So you want to try to find the varieties that come from Sri Lanka and India. The common name for those would either be true cinnamon or Ceylon cinnamon, but they should list the species on the bottle too. So you'd look for Cassia, Aromaticum, Zeylanicum, or Verum species. They're high in essential oils. Cinnamon's high in essential oils like the other spices. This one has tannins and mucilage, which I find kind of interesting because tannins tend to tighten and tone or astringe, and mucilage tends to soothe and coat. So they almost seem to not be compatible with each other, yet they're existent in the same plant, which is cool. So cinnamon is sweet, pungent, warm, stimulating, and astringent because of the tannins. It's contraindicated in pregnancy because it's stimulating, anti-diabetic drugs because there's actual at high doses can help with diabetes, and mineral supplements. I believe that's because of the high tannin content and astringency that it can help, or not help, but hinder absorption of certain minerals would be my guess. So its actions are that it's a circulatory stimulant, just like ginger was, and it's carminative, like both of the other herbs were that we mentioned, turmeric and ginger. But the things that separate it are that it's anti-diabetic, mildly astringent or toning, and it's antiviral. So because it's a circulatory stimulant, it would be good for Raynaud's disease, like the ginger was, but it has a bit more of a focused action on the vascular system. So someone with spider veins would benefit. It's helpful for diabetes and metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, it tends to include a cluster of conditions that would lead towards diabetes, such as having high blood pressure, high triglycerides. You tend to have fat concentrated around your waistline, things like that. And then it can help because it's a carminative like the others were, with flatulence and dyspepsia and nausea. And because it's antiviral, that can help with conditions like intestinal viruses. It's also good for diarrhea because it could be induced from a virus, but because of that toning action, it can kind of tone the mucosa or dry things up. But then the mucilage may help calm down the inflammation a bit, like if the lining is irritated. So I tend to think of cinnamon as great for the diabetic and metabolic cases. I think of it as a simple remedy for diarrhea too. And then the dose can be a half teaspoon divided 3 to 4 times a day. So you'd want to think about ways to get that in a therapeutic dose through food. Might be a bit challenging, but you could certainly do. Some ideas that I came up with was making homemade nut butters, and you could measure how much cinnamon you want to add to your recipe. So that one on the left is a homemade nut butter recipe that is mostly raw almonds, but also has flax seeds, hemp, chia, a little coconut oil and maple syrup, and then cinnamon and sea salt. And you just grind that in a food processor. And probably be a lot cheaper than buying something like that off the shelf. And then the other one is just to make a tea. You probably wouldn't want to have a straight cinnamon tea, but you could add something like hawthorn and rose, and those tend to help be a bit sweeter. They offer a bit of vitamin C, so immune system support, but they also both help with the heart, especially the emotional. Well, hawthorn helps tone the heart muscle, but both of them help with just like a feeling sad or emotionally distraught. So those are two ideas, but there's certainly a lot others out there. And then the next one is thyme. Now thyme is actually in the mint family, even though it doesn't really look like a mint so much, but the Lamiaceae is a mint family. And they, in general, tend to help kind of calm down our nervous system and prepare the body for sleep. And obviously, we know mint can help calm the stomach too. And now, thyme, you actually use the leaf and flower. Those are the parts used. And it originated in southern Europe. It grows here, though, too. And it's high in essential oils like all the others. It's high in flavonoids, which doesn't seem really obvious to me because it doesn't really have a vibrant color, and flavonoids are usually indicated in fruits and vegetables that are really vibrant in colors. And it also has biphenyl compounds, which I'm not really that familiar with that constituent, but one of those is rosmarinic acid, which is also found in the rosemary plant. So you may find that there's some overlap with the uses of those two spices. It's pungent, so very sharp and hot and dry and stimulating, much like the others. There's no contraindications that I know of. Might be interesting to note that flavus in Latin means yellow, and that there might be yellow flowers produced by thyme or a bright plant pigment. So that's where flavonoids comes from, is flavus in Latin, meaning yellow. And then Matthew Wood, who's a well-known herbalist used to be in Wisconsin, states that thyme actually stimulates the thymus gland, which can improve immune system, self-identity, and the adrenal cortex. Thyme's an expectorant, meaning that it could help clear excess mucus from the upper respiratory system. Antispasmodic, antibacterial, antifungal, and antioxidant. So because it's an expectorant, it helps with inflamed upper respiratory system conditions like bronchitis, cough, asthma, and catarrh, meaning that there's an excess discharge or buildup of mucus and you just need to clear it. It helps with any kind of spasmodic condition of the GI, such as dyspepsia, flatulence, and diarrhea. Thymos means strength in Greek, which is kind of nice. Even though it's a very delicate plant, it's very strong and penetrating, and that's implied by the name. And 1 teaspoon 2 to 3 times a day would be a good effective dose. So there's all sorts of ways to get thyme into your body, obviously, too. It would make a great herbal tea, but I thought you might be tired of me giving examples of herbal teas, so I tried to be more creative here. One of the examples I provided is like just making a homemade bone broth and then infusing that with lots of garlic and thyme would really support the immune system and acts on the gut, but overall immune system as well. Garlic's a great one for helping to overcome illnesses too, like bronchitis and things like that. The other thing you could try is to do something more creative, like make homemade herbal cough drops. You could do that with your kids. It'd be kind of like making a healthier candy, and then you could keep those forever and use them whenever someone gets sick. So those are kind of the ideas that I came up with. I'm sure people have others to share. And then the last one is garlic, which we all have had garlic in our lives. It's in the Liliaceae family. The scientific name is Allium sativum. And when we have garlic, we're consuming the bulb of the plant. It originated in Central Asia, but it's grown everywhere now, practically. And the most prevalent constituents that make up garlic is sulfur, the sulfur compounds, which are actually a form of essential oil. And the most prevalent one is allicin, which converts to allen in the presence of the enzyme allinase. So if you have a raw garlic clove and you crush it, you would want to use it immediately raw and crushed because it just released those compounds that have the most therapeutic or medicinal properties. Garlic is pungent, sweet. I don't quite see it as sweet, but perhaps slightly salty, warm, moist, stimulating, and oily. And it's contraindicated in a few things. If you take a lot of it, it can irritate the intestinal mucosa. Used cautiously in conjunction with blood thinners because it has a blood thinning effect in itself. But that would have to be very high dosages to be of concern. It's great for cold and dry conditions because it tends to be oil. It has an oily and moistness to it, where some of the other herbs we mentioned are best for cold, damp conditions. So you want to kind of think of the energetics of someone's illness. Like if they have an upper respiratory infection, is there a lot of damp, mucus, stagnation? Do they need help with clearing that and drying it up, or is it a dry, nagging cough? So that can help determine which spice would be the most appropriate. And it's hypocholesterolemic, hypotensive, antiplatelet, antihelminthic, antifungal, antiparasitic, antibacterial, and diaphoretic. So the hypocholesterolemic obviously helps lower cholesterol. It can help lower triglycerides. Hypotensive means it helps with hypertension, so lowers blood pressure. And it's great for atherosclerosis. It helps really with it has a lot of benefits just for the cardiovascular system. And if you turn the bulb of garlic upside down, it actually looks like a heart. So I always would say that to children, is remember that garlic just is good for the heart, and it kind of looks like that. So it helps with a lot of that, the things with the cardiovascular system. It actually relaxes the arteries, which is partially why it helps with hypertension and atherosclerosis. A lot of the volatile oils are excreted largely in the lungs, which makes it really effective with clearing infections of the upper respiratory system. And another interesting thing about garlic is it is antiparasitic and antihelminthic, meaning it can help expel worms and parasites. But when doing that, it may help the die-off of the more harmful organisms, but it doesn't cause die-off of the beneficial ones. So it's great in that way, that it can actually balance the bowel flora. It can be used in candida, obviously with some other dietary and probably other supplements or herbs, but can be effective for that. And if you can do, 1 clove a day would be great just as a daily maintenance. But if you need to address a more acute imbalance, you'd want to increase it to up to 3 a day cloves. And it can be really difficult to get raw garlic down without having a gag reflex or any burning or discomfort. So there's a couple ways that I would recommend that. One is you can try to just ferment them so that you're getting some more beneficial bacteria and enzymes in your body, and the cloves are still raw, so they're not really, the medicinal constituents are still available, but they're more palatable. So I give you some recipes for a lacto fermented garlic, and then fermented honey garlic. And that would be great if you could just take that almost as a daily dose, and then increase when you're starting to get sick. And then you can also make homemade fire cider. It sells on the shelf in health food stores, and it's not cheap, but you can make it at home pretty cheaply, and it's mostly got ginger, horseradish, onion, garlic, jalapeno, and then some other herbs like rosemary, turmeric, and cayenne. And if you can take a little shot glass of that or cook with it, then that has a lot of immune system properties too. So that would be a good way to do it. So now we're just getting near the end, and I wanted to highlight a medicinal food that we're going to actually make in the workshop, which are just different herbal pestos. So a lot of us have had pesto, and it's traditionally made with basil, but you can use all sorts of greens, and you can pair them together or alone, and it can be tailored based on what imbalances you have in the body that you want to address. So here's a few examples. We know basil, and that is good for acute digestive issues and respiratory issues, just like all the other spices we've talked about today. But it's also an adaptogen, meaning that it can help your body become a bit more resilient to stress. And it can also help kind of adapt to what your energy needs are. So if you're having basil in the early morning, it can help make you more alert or wake up. And then if you have it at nighttime, it can actually calm you down or relax you. And it is similar to holy basil, which is more of an herb that it would be drunk as a tea, but the culinary basil works just the same. And traditionally, it was actually used to help people detoxify from toxicity from any drugs that they had taken. In India, it was used to help people detoxify from marijuana use because the toxins would store in their adipose tissue, but basil has a way of helping to clear that, which is important because we do store a lot of our toxins in our fat. And cilantro is also great for digestive issues, which makes a lot of sense. It's great for intestinal viruses, but it's specifically used to help detoxify from heavy metal exposure. The research on it is a bit mixed, but just remember cilantro is great for heavy metal detoxification, and basil is great for drug detoxification, as well as stress. Parsley, dandelion, and nettle all are very nutrient dense. They obviously vary just slightly in their profiles of those, but just know that they're nutrient dense. Parsley helps with acute digestive issues. It's great for the kidneys, helps cleanse and strengthen kidneys. Great if you have a bladder infection, and it's also great for adrenal exhaustion or to strengthen the adrenals, so stress. And you could even, if you had a bladder infection or kidney infection, you could actually juice and put that either in a blend with other things that you're juicing, or you could just juice a little shot glass of it. It's sort of a tonic. And dandelions are by far the most bitter of the 5 up there. So we don't have many bitters in our diet anymore, and they are really important because they kind of prime the digestive system to receive food and assimilate and break it down, because they will help your body produce hydrochloric acid and enzymes that can help with digestion. So dandelions are great if you can add them in. Nutrient dense, really good for the kidneys. Digestive tonic. So if you have just had long-term kind of digestive imbalances, like you tend to feel gassy or bloated or inconsistent stool, like that would be a good thing to do daily for quite a while, is incorporate dandelions into your diet. And stinging nettle is great. You do have to blanch them before you make a pesto with them because they do sting. But they're a great source of iron, especially for women who are pregnant. They can help to cope or support seasonal allergies, so they can reduce allergic reactions. They're great if someone tends to have low blood pressure. Anti-inflammatory, which tends to be why they help with allergic reactions. And they're also really wonderful for men to have as a preventative, but also to slow the progression of prostate cancer. So those are just more general overviews. I didn't go into depth as much as I did with the other 5 spices, but just know that you can kind of use those, play around with them, and make various pestos. You can even make big batches and freeze them in ice cubes or something, and pull out just a small sample when you feel like using them throughout the winter or something. So consider that as a possible easy kind of medicinal food that you can custom tailor depending on what you're looking for. And that's kind of the end of the presentation. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I do have a website. It's just my first and last name, and it's listed right up at the top. You can contact me through there. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks for your time. Here's the resources. Those are all textbooks. I didn't go into looking at the clinical trials with PubMed or anything this time. But those are all good textbooks to kind of acquire if you're interested in starting to learn more about the clinical herbal medicine stuff. Okay, thank you. Bye.